Okay, hello guys and welcome back to Chris Flies Planes. Chris here of course, and today we are back in Aerofly FS2 flying the beautiful Bombardier Dash 8Q-400. So today we are flying the tutorial flight, which you can find on the Aerofly wiki online, from San Diego to San Francisco. So Kilo Sierra Alpha November to Kilo Lima Alpha X-Ray via a couple of NBBs here, VOR sorry. So via SAN, November Foxtrot Golf, Echo Lima Bravo, and then landing on 25 right in LAX. So if we just jump in here, so we are running through the tutorial today guys, so I do have a checklist in front of me. I have very little flight time in this plane, but it should be a little bit of fun. So first things first, we need to get the engine started up, so let's just start going through our checklist here. Let's get our parking brake set. We're going to pop up to the engineer seat and have a look up here. Set the exterior lights to red. We're going to arm the emergency signs. They are on arm already, and we're going to check that fasten seat belts and no smoking signs are on. We're going to look into the ice protection. We're going to make sure the engine intakes are both open. Just click there. Then up to the air conditioning. That should be on rec. And bleed 1 and 2 should be off, which they are. Okay, next up we have, let me see. Okay, we're going to start the APU. We're going to click power and it's going to run through its own self-test, so you'll see the lights flash. Then we can hit start. We're just going to wait a moment and we should see a green run light on the power button there. Okay, and we can turn the generator on. Bleed air is going to remain off, and we're going to pop our head up here and turn the main bus tie to tie. And that should be everything we need to do to start the engine. So we're going to go to the engine start panel here. We're going to make sure that norm is set on both engines. We're going to select engine 1. We're going to hit start. Then straight away we're going to mouse down and turn engine 1 to start and feather. You'll hear that start. You can see in the engine panel here when this hits 50%, you can hear the starter click off, and then that should stabilize nice and quickly. And we can pop up and do the same thing for engine 2. So flick it over to engine 2, hit start, look down and set that to start and feather. And check that is going up, and that is. Should hear that click off. Perfect. Once we've started up, we can now turn off the APU, so we can go generator off, power off, and the main bus tie can go back off. And there we go. Okay, now we're going to start setting up our glass cockpit. So we're going to switch over to the pilot seat here, and we're going to zoom in a little bit. First thing we're going to do is set our MDA bug to 1500 feet. So if we just right click that, and then scroll on this middle guy, we're going to set that to 1500 MDA. Okay, up to the autopilot. I'm going to select the FMS1 navigation source, which it already is. You can see down here on our PFD. We are going to check toga, so press toga. And you'll see wing level and GA pop up on our PFD there. And let's set the altitude to 1500 feet, which will up on this mouth wheel here. We can see the altitude at the top of the altitude tab here. Heading up, we're going to set that to 15,000, sorry, which is our cruising altitude. And then hit Alt-Cell to arm this. You can see that white above the altitude ribbon there. Just showing that it's armed. Next up, we can use our heading select. So if we just set that to 273, which is our runway heading, so you can see that in a couple of places, but if we look down on the main PFD there, see 273 is set. And then we're going to click heading to make sure heading select is on. You can see on the flight annunciator here. So we should have heading select, GA for go around, and Alt select highlighted there, 15,000 on the ribbon, heading of 273, and 1500 on the MDA. So that's all absolutely fine. We can now start setting up the plane for taxiing. So we're going to set the prop levers to all the way forwards, which is 1020, sorry. I'm going to hear a little bit of noise there. Check parking brake is on just once more. Going to set our flaps to 5. There we go. And we're going to pop over to our flight engineer seat and we're going to set our trims. So elevator trim is already set to TO for takeoff, which is absolutely fine. And this one we're going to right click 8 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And that will just set our rudder. As we apply power, obviously the aircraft is going to try and pull left, so we're correcting for that. We can then turn the auto feather on, turn on our standby hydraulic pressure and our PTU control, and we're going to click the tank 1 aux pump and the tank 2 aux pump on. Now if we just pop our head up to the overhead here, I'm going to check that all of these guys are on, the pitos, which they are. We are going to check the air intakes. We're going to set this guy to ISO, which it is now. These are set to open, which is absolutely fine. Pop over to the air conditioning here. We're going to make sure that the bleeds are on. We're going to set that to min on the bleeds. Okay. Next up, we are going to try and do this. Left side of a pilot seat. This one's a little bit difficult because it's quite hard to see. So we're going to set the steering switch to off. We are going to set the control lock. I believe that is off. We're going to test all the flight controls are free and moving, which they are. We're going to set hydraulic 3 isolator valve to on and check that our elevators and ailerons are working, which they are. I'm going to turn that back off, set the control lock to on, please, thank you, and steering lock back on. That is our flight control check. So that is us all ready for taxi now. Let's just make sure we are correctly configured and not massively high, which I think we are. Should just squeeze down a little bit there. Perfect, and let's get rolling. So we can turn the parking brake off, sorry. And a little bit of power. I've only got a short taxi today up to runway 22. Let's just do a couple of things down here. Just going to click these buttons twice to set our RDC to 86%. It's just going to limit our flight power on takeoff. We do not need full power. So that's done, and then click the auto feather button to arm the system. Imagine that's armed. I'm going to check the spoilers are armed, which they are. Going to make sure yaw damper is on, which it is. And we can now check our configuration with this switch hidden in front of the tiller again. So we just click that forwards. If we hear no noise, it means we are correctly configured for takeoff. So let's just get ourselves back on this taxiway here. Okay, let's get our landing and approach lights on. Taxi light can go off. Our taxi light was already off, that should have been on. This guy can go to white. And bleeds, yeah, bleeds can probably go off now. Let's have a look up here. Okay. Check through my things. Everything's looking pretty great. And we are about at the runway here. Okay, so for our takeoff briefing, we are going to apply full power, rotate at VR, gear up, stabilize the aircraft, and then we can engage autopilot. 400 feet, we're going to engage LNAV. 1500 feet, we are going to select IAS with 210 knots, then we can retract the flaps. Not too much to do. Can feel like it when you're first doing a takeoff, but it's not too bad. Okay. So let's just get ourselves lined up down the center line here. A little bit further. There we go. So we are going to hold our brakes. Throttle her up to 50%. Check that the engines head up and stabilize. Release the brakes and throttle the rest of the way. Keep ourselves lined up down the center line here where we can. Then we're looking for VR on the speed tape. Okay, then we can throttle back. Looking at the flight director on the thing, keeping us nice and level. We are going to flick autopilot on. Don't know why autopilot didn't go on there, but now it is on. We are going to go gear up. We are going to engage LNAV. Okay, 1500 feet. We can select IAS at 210 knots. Got a little bit hairy there, but we managed to get our way through it. Okay, IAS and set that to 210. And flaps up. Okay, that should be us configured now. Well, let's set climb power on the props here, so we're going to set them down to 900. And then we're going to do standby pressure, PTU control, tanks off, and click the autopilot button. And there we go, we're now configured for our climb. I'll take a moment to look outside. Just look how beautiful this game is. I say it every time I play Aerofly. Isn't it just absolutely stunning? I love it. Right, let's jump back in the aircraft here. So we get to relax for a little bit now, just passing through 5,000 feet. Nothing to do until we pass through 10,000 feet. And when we do, we've got a few things to do. You can see at the top of cruise on our navigation screen there. It's only going to be a short flight today, but we will go through all the motions, as it only seems like the correct thing to do. Love the autopilot in these planes, it's so great. I like the way they've implemented it in this game. Not too complicated, it's not like PMDG level, but you do still get a kick out of flying it. It's still quite enjoyable, so that's good. Why else would we be doing this if we didn't enjoy it, eh? Okay, passing through 7,000. Looks like a pretty calm flight today. I'm just going to jump into the flight engineer seat and we're going to turn off the fasten seatbelt sign. Yeah, we're pretty chilled today. Close the engine intakes as well. Back into the pilot seat. And when we pass through 10,000 fairly soon, we can turn off the landing and approach lights. Okay, 9,500 feet. Holding a steady at around 210 knots. We should start leveling around now. Well, not leveling around at the top of the cruise side, but we can turn the approach and flare lights off. And continue our climb up. So once we level out, we'll then reduce our power to cruise power. And then immediately start preparing the plane for the descent, as it's only a short flight, 103 nautical miles I believe. Really is beautiful. I wish you could sit in passenger seats. Feel like that would be pretty cool. Let's look at all the different views here. Beautiful. Is that it? That's about it for views. I love this game. It really is fun. I don't play it too often. I'm pretty obsessed with DCS, to be honest. It's such a great game to fly, DCS. But this game is so enjoyable when I do jump in and fly it. And still being actively developed, so they keep adding things to get me back into the game, which is very enjoyable. Passing through 13,000 feet now, approaching our cruising altitude. $14,000. Okay, so let's reduce our prop speeds down to 850, and we're going to reduce our throttle to around 68% torque. Very little movements needed. You can see the torque ratings here at the top of this center PFD. Perfect. So that's at around 75% or so. It should hold us hopefully somewhere around 260 knots once we get leveled out and flattened. And we are good. So let's start looking at our approach briefing. So we can do a VNAV descent. It's not that common in the real world, but we are going to do that, because that is what the tutorial wants us to do. So we're not going to do anything until once we've passed NFG, November Foxtrot Golf, which is the VOR in front of us. And then we can start getting everything configured for descent and landing. You can already see on our navigation map there the top of descent, so it's only maybe 25-30 miles away, so it's going to be approaching very quickly. So we're at 260 knots. Okay, we're about to start our turn past November Foxtrot Golf, and we can start thinking about what we are doing here. Here we go. So one thing we should be doing is with the heading, we should be keeping the heading matching the FMS1 heading stated there. It's just good practice, and we'll actually be using that to navigate later on. But if we have a problem with the autopilot, it's good practice to have that lined up and accurate at all times. Once we get settled out here and on the old straight and narrow, we can start preparing for our descent. So we're going to be using the VNav, as I said, the vertical navigation functionality, to get us down to the ground. It saves us having to do it all ourselves. So what we are going to do is check FMS1 is set as our navigation source, which it is. And we're going to go over the altitude knob here, and we're going to reduce this down to 3000. And if we hit the Alt Cell button and then the VNav button, that is all we need to do. It is now armed, so once we pass the TOD, the top of descent on the navigation display, that will start us into our descent. All we need to do is keep an eye on the throttle and make sure we don't overspeed on the way down. Let's just check our cabin pressurization here. So we just set ourselves as flight engineer, just so we're looking at this straight on. And our landing altitude we want to set at 120 feet, which is, let's say, it's 100, that's probably about 120 feet. We can actually have a look down and probably check that a little bit. Fuck it. I'm not actually 100% sure that's modelled right now. If we pop back over into a pilot seat, we can set our speed bug. Let's just get zoomed in here, and we can click select, and we're going to change this guy down to 122. Let's pop into our co-pilot seat and do the same. Always good practice to make sure both of these are set the same. So that is our VREF speed. Okay, we're now going to set the decision height. So if we just click this a couple of times, left click the outer wheel a couple of times, and then mouse wheel this, we're going to set the decision height to 120. That is when we decide, that is our last chance to decide if we want to go around or stop. Again, we're going to set that on this guy as well. We're not going to mess with the MDA here. That's a terrible idea. We've just hit our VNAD path, so it's we need to keep an eye on the speed now. Actually going to reduce the throttle already down to 50%. And continue setting that decision height to 120. I'm going to set the throttle all the way down to flight idle. There we go. That should do that job. And yeah, we do need to keep an eye on the speed now we're in this position. It could definitely go very wrong. Okay, so now we get to relax a little bit until we pass through our transition level at 10,000 feet. Oh, not transition level, sorry. Until we pass through 10,000 feet, not the transition level. We can turn the seatbelt signs back on. Actually, we should probably do that now, really, as we're descending. I feel like that's probably a great decision. And then, once we pass through 10,000, we can set the approach and flare landing lights to on. And then we can look at our before approach checks. We're on the way down now. Speed could be a little bit faster now. We're going to throttle up to somewhere in the region of 28%. Looks to be around 50% throttle there. Maybe a nudge more. To keep that speed up, we want to be approaching 260 knots realistically. So a little bit more throttle. Little bit more throttle, like tiniest movements. I should put it around 27-28%, which is about right. Passing through 12,000. Zero visibility. It's always a little bit scary. There we go, nice and cleared up. Speed's about where we want it to be. Just approaching our next turn now at Echo Lima Bravo. And we can set our heading to match at 295, which is there. It gets very important here because we are going to start using that heading setting very rapidly. So it is very important that you do remember to sync that up. It does make life a lot easier. There's going to be a lot of things to do coming up very soon. Okay. So we're now approaching 10,000 feet, so we can turn our approach and flare lights on. Next up, when we pass 7,000 feet, or we're about 15 nautical miles from our next turn point, which is at onto the runway approach, we can start the next stage here. Should be quite exciting. I'm going to reduce our speed down a nudge. Want to maintain about a 10 knot margin between our speed and the I'm just going to put back to flight idle and that red tape. Check what alt cell is armed, which it is. Both PFDs have 120 DH sets. Rudder trim is still set. 3,000 foot is set. We're looking pretty fantastic here, I reckon. And yeah, just about passing through 7,000. We can now start thinking, well actually if we look down here, you can see on this guy here, I can't remember, I think this might be the Arcu, I can't remember. See the ILS setting here, which is set to 110.500. That will change by itself to 110.100. This caught me out the first time I did it. It will change automatically on the flight plan, but it's not going to do it yet. It will do it fairly soon. We can't do anything until it does, so we are just going to relax for now. That will happen about 15 nautical miles out. So we can just keep our head forwards at the minute. Once that is done, we can then get ourselves set up to capture. That is the ILS is the localizer. It's going to fly our plane onto the approach for us and basically control most of the landing. We're going to just flare manually right at the end and hopefully not kill everyone in our brief moment of responsibility. Okay, that's now set. We're going to pop over to our co-pilot seat here and we are going to set his nav source to ILS2 and check that it is capturing that. It's absolutely fine. You can see it says ILS2 there and IFCFN, which is what it needs to be. Then we can pop over to our left hand side and we can actually use a little trick here just to catch it. If we right click this format button, it's going to temporarily show us ILS1 on this guy without disrupting anything. And if we right click that again, it will go back to normal. So we can know that's being captured, which is great. That is what we want. And we're now going to make sure we're capturing it smoothly. So we're going to click the VS push button here on the autopilot. And we're going to set that to -1000, which is actually set at now, which is great news. We're going to click the heading select button here to engage heading select. As you can see here, it's now based on our heading select, which we've been keeping synced up. As I said, it is quite important to make sure we do that. Next, we can switch our nav source over to ILS1 and click the approach button here. And now we can see heading select, LOC in white. Let's check. Our VS is still set, -1000, and our altitude select and GS. So that is all great. So now we're just going to let the plane do its own thing whilst we just work through the few remaining items on the checklist. So we're going to turn the PTU control on, the standby hydraulic pressure on. We are going to set the tank 1 aux pump and tank 2 aux pumps on. We're going to click the auto feather button there. And there we go. Again, we have a little bit of time to relax. You can see the beautiful city of LA off in front of us. Let's have a look around. Just love looking around. It looks really great at this height. As you get really low in this game, it just starts to look a little bit like Google Earth, because basically that's what it is. Oh, we're going a little bit too slow there. Let's just get throttled up to... Yeah, there we go. Really important that you keep a look at your speed there. Let's get that set back at around that 28% mark. Yeah, very important you keep an eye on the speed there. But we did get the audible warning, and all it was a case of pushing her up to 60% throttle. And yeah, getting that fixed. Everything seems to still be set up well. There's no warnings. I think we're okay. I think we had done just fine. Next up, we're going to be setting our speed down to about 180 knots, which we're actually not a million miles off anyway. There we go, we are just locking into our altitude here of 3,000 feet. Can probably, not quite, see the airport off just to the left there. It's just behind that the pillar to our left. That is where we are going. Hopefully the plane should do this final turn itself, if all goes well. It's certainly the dream. When it does, you should see this LOC here. I think it goes green and gets a star next to it. It might just get a star next to it. I'm not sure which one, but we'll find out fairly rapidly. Then we're going to reduce our speed to hopefully about 180 knots and go down to 5 degrees of flaps. We should be capturing it any second here, hopefully. Maintaining 3,000 knots, I'm going to reduce our speed down a little bit. Just above flight idle there. And a little bit more, around 45%. Once we level out on this turn, we can go to the first stage of flaps. Okay, first stage of flaps, and then we are going to set our reduced NP landing. So we're going to move the throttles back to 850. They already are back at 850. We're going to click the RDC lock button, which is here. And then we are going to push the throttles forwards to full power. And you'll hear that actually the power won't go up quite yet. Okay, next we can reduce our speed. Going to go gear down and 15 degrees of flaps should be our final flap setting. And we're going to reduce the speed back even further to flight idle. Sorry, we're at 10 degrees of flaps, not 15 degrees of flaps. When we get down to around 1500 on the radar altimeter, which is the radar height just here, we're going to set 15 stages of flaps there and try and keep our speed around 135 knots. So let's get our next stage of flaps on there. We want to keep, basically we want to keep our speed between those two arrows is the dream. Okay, we're going to set our bleed strength to min. It's already on min, so that's all fine. We're set to dual FD, you can see on the flight meter here, which is great, that is what we want to be. Speed is slow. Yeah. I caught it, don't worry. I'm setting around 28% on our speed here. It's pretty much where we want to be. It's not very smooth, I kind of juggled it around a little bit. But we do want to be reducing speed quite heavily now. Once we pass below 120, we are going to kill the autopilot and hopefully land her. We'll push our approach power up to around 28%. Okay, and we are about ready here. Should be passing the threshold at around decision height. So that is we are going massively off course here. Let's pop her down. Pop it down, come on. Okay, well it wasn't my best landing ever, but also wasn't my worst landing ever. So let's pop around. I'm going to follow this yellow line here. And we're going to actually just head to this gate directly in front of us. Let's just quickly get the lights off here. Taxi lights can go on and these guys can go to red just so we don't blind any other pilots. Let's get the flight director clear. Put that on standby. Spoilers can go to taxi. I'm going to close the engine intakes, they already are. Flaps up. Control lock can go on. And then fuel pumps off. Let's go fuel pumps off. Put that on standby. Going to get our weather radar on off. Can set the main bus to tie just up here. And then as we're about to turn into our stand, get the taxi lights back off and let's get that turn in done. That'll probably do. Okay, let's very quickly run through the shutdown procedure. It's nice and easy. So we're going to get the parking brake off. We're going to get the hydraulics off, PTU control off, steering can go off. We're going to set these guys to start and feather. They're going to be there for 30 seconds. We're not actually going to leave them there for 30 seconds. Weather radar is off already. We're going to get our APU running. So we're going to click power to jump into the flight engineer seat here. And then start. And gen and bleed air can go on as soon as green run comes up. Okay, the air conditioning bleeds can be off, which they still are. We can now set the throttle quadrant to cutoff. We'll hear the engine stop. Fasten seatbelts can go off and the anti-collisions can go off. And let's kill those warning lights. And that is us done, guys. I hope you enjoyed the flight. This was the tutorial flight from San Diego to San Francisco in the Dash Q400, Dash 8, sorry, Q400 Bombardier propeller passenger jet. Fly safe, guys. I'll see you next time.